All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So folks can please feel free, you can be off camera, have your lunch. This is your lunchtime on a Friday and it is all good. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk, Paul's going to brief us a bit on the background of the United Nations and the COP talks and sort of what they are. I'm going to talk just a bit about climate justice fundamentals from an international perspective and what's sort of on the table at COP in that regard. Then we'll stop and we'll stop and we'll just have some Q&A because we ain't going to talk a long time. We're going to talk a little bit and then we'll stop. Then I'll go ahead and talk about the movement for Black Lives and the Black Climate Mandate. I'm a member of the Black Hive, and I'm fortunate enough to be going to the COP in Egypt, leaving on Sunday with as a part of the Movement for Black Lives delegation. And it's the first time that the movement has sent a delegation. I'm also going with Facing Future TV, and I'll be doing some programs from there. But I want to tell folks about the Black Climate Mandate. You can learn how you can also join the Hive, get involved. It's really important. And then, Paul will speak a bit more to why. I know it's big international things, but why is it so important for all of us to engage here on the ground? And then we'll have some questions and go about our day and weekend. All right, so I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back to Paul for some background on the United Nations and the COP talks and why it's important.
Thank you so much, Raya. So I'm happy to be here with all of you. My name is Paul Presendu. I'm a resident of the city of New Rochelle. I also serve as the municipal government's Environmental Advisory Committee Chair, where I'm helping put together city and municipal-wide strategies for climate resilience and our decarbonizations so we can meet the compliance of not only New York State's progressive climate agenda, but also what we need to do for the international community as one of the more affluent communities, because residents in New Rochelle, on average, have 24-hour access to electricity, and you could turn a faucet and have access to running water. And this is why I'm actually happy with the work that I'm doing with the United Nations. I always consider myself a product of the international community. My biological mother is from Cali, Colombia. My biological father is from St. Mark, Haiti. But since 2005, I have had a stepmother from Alabat in the nation of the Philippines, Quezon. And I'm actually happy that I see people like Raya, Lisa Burton here, and also John Rhodes, because if it wasn't for great leaders such as you, I would not have the courage to continue doing what I'm doing in terms of equity conversations locally in Westchester County. In terms of the international community, over 82.5% of our global community resides outside of the United States of America, Canada, and Europe, which predominantly have a strong presence and economic presence in our global community. So it's tough, talking equity locally in Westchester, where we're pushing a boulder up a mountain, but on an international space, equity is a status quo. You're really talking to people that are really not only geographically diverse, racially diverse, but also predominantly those demographics are pretty prevalent in the communities that are facing the brunt of our climate-related issues, such as the nations of Pakistan, the nations of Bangladesh, our Pacific Island nations, or even the nations that are in the front lines of seeing deforestation or issues such of that impact. But I'm here to talk about what we can do and what is being done. The Conference of Parties on COP27, which is being held this year in Egypt, is a really dynamic opportunity for us to be able to have a strong presence as Americans. We have currently right now 60 heads of states that plan to be in attendance there that have been confirmed. And we also have representations from over 100 nations. Our President Biden, will be in attendance in Egypt, as well as our US climate envoy, John Kerry. And it's very important that he's there because of his background in civil service, serving as the former United States Secretary of State and a former US Senator that served as the chair of the US Senate's Committee on Foreign Relations. So he's able to build upon the relationships that he had while as a member of government. So in terms of our background on COP, the Conference of Parties, or formerly known as the UN Climate Change Conference, it started first out of 1992 from the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, where we're able to come together as member states of the United Nations and be able to discuss what needs to be done in terms of an international community. We see right now, Rio de Janeiro, 1992 was when the global community made a first attempt to have a conversation on an international level on things that are occurring in terms of our ocean, in terms of the impact of the current status quo then, which is still here now, the status quo of our energy infrastructure, and making sure that we have an equitable playing field in regards to the discourse of what needs to be done, and making sure that some of the smaller nations do not be disenfranchised with a seat at the table just because of their GDP margins compared to some of the powerhouse countries, as I mentioned before, such as the United States, Canada, and Europe. So in terms of the conference, it's really an invaluable opportunity for us to be able to not only discuss what needs to be done, but also what is occurring in current countries. I know the United States of America, we have a lot of issues that are occurring here. We have over a fifth of the state of Louisiana that exists in flooded water. We have wildfires that are occurring at an exponential rate in the state of California, as well as in the state of Oregon. We also have municipalities in Westchester County that are dealing with really devastating issues or at risk in terms of flooding or overall historical infrastructural issues. So it's really an opportunity for us to kind of discuss what kind of alignments and partnerships to be established across national borders. For those of you who may or may not know, the United Nations was founded in 1945, but I'm actually involved with the Conference of Parties through the United Nations Association, which is an organization established in 1943 through the leadership of great leaders such as Eleanor Roosevelt. Also, we have strong leaders such as the Honorable Johanna Edwards, City of Mount Vernon representative, who serves as our former president, is now the chair of our Civic Engagement Committee, but helping as currently as the United Nations Association's global ambassador for the 13th Sustainable Development Goal, climate change, to be able to make sure that United Nations members of United Nations Association members are aware about Conference of Parties proceedings and be able to access the observer status. So if any of you would like to be able to access what the meeting agenda looks like and to be able to access ways of keeping track remotely from the convenience of your home, please let me know and I can provide that toolkit for you to be able to access the proceedings. Did you? Oh yeah, of course, Raya. I definitely would. Yes, it's really important for us to be aware of what's being discussed and how we can facilitate those conversations, because we're in a global community now, and it's important that we do what we can from our positions of privilege. I'll be honest, I got to put it like that, because compared to what the global community looks like, to be able to do what we can do to go above and beyond. My experience in the UN has been phenomenal. Before I had my current post with the United Nations Association as the Global Ambassador for the 13th Sustainable Development Goal Climate Action in 2020, I was actually selected to serve as United States of America's youth delegate to the UN General Assembly and the Economic and Social Council's youth plenary. So it was a great opportunity for me to talk to other young parliamentarians, young people in government. United States of America does not have a youth parliament, which is an issue that I've been advocating for. It's pretty unfortunate because we need that investment in civic literacy so people know not only who their national representatives are dealing with foreign relations or foreign affairs. Foreign relations for the Committee of the Senate, foreign affairs is the Congressional Committee, but also to know who are representatives leading negotiations through the Department of States as diplomats or as ambassadors. So, it's important. So me having that exposure at a very relatively young age did allow me to really meet with other people in different countries that are young in the space, but also are be inspired by them, because they definitely are fighting for things that they're seeing front hand, as opposed to me through videos on YouTube or international television, such as the BBC. But this year, the conferences, it's going to be very, very vital. We have recently made a transition in terms of how our national government is dealing with issues of the international community. Hopefully we can have conversations dealing with reports that have come out regarding the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a gyre of ocean that is located in the Pacific Ocean that is twice the size of Texas and 3 times the size of France, or even studies and reports that have come out. For example, was the British environmentalist Ellen MacArthur, who released studies partnered by the scientific journal that shows that we're currently on a track of having more garbage and debris in our oceans than marine life by the year 2050. So things are getting very, very apocalyptic, I would say. And unless we do what we need to do for a position of leveraging what we can do, we're not going to be able to meet those demands. It's not Pakistan, it's not Bangladesh that are leading our global climate emissions. It's us in the United States of America, Westchester County, communities that have rebates and incentives from their state government to be able to decarbonize, but people for some reason aren't doing so. Right now in Westchester County, we have access to a community choice aggregation program where you could offset your electricity supply at 14 cents, 15 cents a kilowatt. But for some people, it's not worth them not going to the bar once a month to be able to make those economic demands meet. So it's really important that we do what we can do, taking advantage of the resources that we have here in the state of New York, because we have a lot of eyes that are on us. The UN headquarters are actually located in the state of New York and New York City. So unless all of us do what we need to do through a sense of awareness, it's going to be very difficult for the people that do not have access to a fraction of the resources that we have access to here in New York or Westchester County or the United States of America in general. I guess I don't want to ramble too much, Raya, but
well, actually, Paul, I realized I presumed that everybody on the call knew who you were, and I didn't do a proper introduction.
Oh,
Maybe
yes.
you could do just a small, an outro introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Paul Presendu. I'm the currently United Nations Association of America's Global Ambassador for the 13th Sustainable Development Goal, Climate Action. I also do serve on the board of directors for the United Nations Association of Westchester County as the Young Professionals Chair, helping people that are before they become the age of 40, be aware of what resources are available for them to be able to pursue, extracurricular civic engagement or professional career trajectories that are in alignment of supporting our global community. And I'm also the chair of the City of New Rochelle's Environmental Advisory Committee, where I'm helping the City Council, the mayor, and our city government be able to put together climate policy and decarbonization strategy that works for all. And the only reason why I have my position in the City of New Rochelle is because people like Raya and Lisa Burton might be too busy, but I do lean upon their wisdom to help steer the trajectory of how equity should be done in communities in Westchester County.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. Paul is, he's so tremendous. We're so fortunate to have him in our community. We have so many diplomats in our community. That's another thing in New Rochelle. It's amazing. So there's a lot of importance and relevance for us. And go ahead and move along again to our presentation. One of these days, I'll just go straight to the presentation. All right. So before we hit Q&A, just want to talk a little bit about what is climate justice and what is climate justice in the context of the Conference of the Parties and what we're going to be talking about next week. So there's this idea, as Hall said, that the global north has incurred a climate debt for its historical contributions to climate change. We know that the wealthy Western countries, not only, we know India and China are also large historical emitters, but the United States is the largest historical emitter in the world, along with other Western countries. And we are causing the climate crisis. And it is the global South that is experiencing the impacts of the crisis first and worst, literally now. So there's this idea that the polluter should pay. Those who have caused the problem are implicated in finding solutions. And also that, and this is where we get into a bit of the more of the international frame, that there's a state responsibility for transboundary harm. We have international rules and norms, and that is one of them. So the UNFCCC, requires the global north to take the lead in combating climate change and the adverse effects thereof, and provide financing and technology transfer to the countries of the global South. How can folks adapt to climate change and also leapfrog to cleaner energy and more sustainable practices if they don't have the resources to do so? And so what are the stakes? Internationally, we fully understand. This is a picture of the Marshall Islands. They could lose 77% of their population in the next couple generations. You can see, how close to the water this community is. But also, this is Miami from just the most recent storm, right? Like this happens right on our own shores, and it also impacts Black, Indigenous people of color first and worst. It impacts us all. But this was just from a few weeks ago in Miami. Of course, this is a picture from New Rochelle from the storm we had last year. We understand what the storm has done, what it does to our neighborhoods, where we get flooding, what it did to our high school. And of course, we have only just celebrated, celebration is the right word, the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. I share one of these iconic pictures of Hurricane Sandy, very New York with the yellow cabs underwater. A lot of folks have been memorializing. This was also from just a couple of weeks ago. There were protests, about, remember Hurricane Sandy. I think at the time, 10 years ago, we were still in a place where we weren't, we knew that storms like that were caused by the climate crisis. We knew that we could expect more increasingly storms like that caused by the climate crisis. But now the science has improved, the dots are connected. We know that these storms are actually caused by the climate crisis. And it's something that we need to keep speaking to. And also I show this picture because who don't you see in the picture? I don't see a lot of folks, Black, brown, and otherwise, not that we aren't in the movement, and we are, but here in New Rochelle, we need to do these things together. We need to center frontline leadership, but we need to do these things as allies, with and across races. And that's something we always need to be thinking about. So in the COP context, how will COP27, will the agreement acknowledge this need for this pool of money to address historic harms, climate debt? Such a fund would. Now, here's the thing. Be separate from other adaptation funds for poorer nations. So this idea of loss or damage. Okay, I thought I called it. Yeah, okay. So this is the idea of, and this is what you're going to hear at the COP from the global South nations, the small island states. Loss or damage. We need to be made whole from loss or damage. That means we are actually losing our country, right? The Marshall Islands, they won't be able to live there anymore. And so what does that mean? And that is over and above any other funds that may be targeted for adaptation or clean energy, is this idea of loss or damage. And what we're really doing, and it's, folks have heard of the Paris Agreement from 2015. That was really the first time that the nations really came together to agree on how to address the climate crisis. Is it enough? No, but there's this implementation from that year now, 6-7 years out. And loss and damage is included in the Paris Agreement. It recognizes loss and damage, creates a committee that's supposed to look at it, and a task force it's like, what type of mechanisms can we come forward with to actually address loss and damage? And so I just wanted to share a bit about, and so you're going to see folks from the global South. It's going to be one of the main issues at the COP. It was one of the main issues last year, this idea of loss and damage. The United States is actually the #1 country that is blocking progress on loss and damage. Why? Because we're the largest historical emitter. And so there is major liability implicated by that. And so I want folks to know that it is the United States, it is us that is holding up climate justice. I also want to say, as much as we say, oh, nothing ever happens at the COPs, et cetera, it's an important COP because it's now or never, or now or never soon. Because now President Biden is going himself. Why? One reason is because the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. At the federal level, we have the largest investment in climate, and there are a lot of problems with it. And there's a lot to say about the IRA, but it is still the largest investment in climate in United States history. So if President Biden is able to show up like he wasn't last year, when we didn't get a Build Back Better, he's able to show up saying, we have action, America is leading. The second big thing I think is happening is, of course, the war in Ukraine has thrust us into a global energy crisis. I'm sure folks know. I know my utility bills have gone up several $100s already, and it's making a difference. There are projections that, folks, because of these geopolitical reasons, countries, France, Germany, are figuring out how can we make a transition to renewables and get off gas. And those commitments alone are actually shown to cause a pivot of emissions going down. And so we've got this geopolitical risk and this problem, this need to end the dependence on fossil fuels. And you have the president himself, in addition to his envoy, at the conference. Whatever's been arranged, of course, they've already arranged it. They're going to announce it. We don't know what breakthroughs will happen. The Global South will be making big noise about loss and damage. But I just wanted to give that context, a little bit more context about the COP, and I think reason to be hopeful. The other thing is that activists showing up at COP, and it's difficult, it's a privileged thing to do, right? To like fly around the world and do this. It also causes emissions, but it's really important. The NGO pressure at these talks is very important. And who are we fighting? Big oil and gas, big plastic and petrochemical, are showing up in force. And so it's just another reason why it's important for us to have a window into what's going on. So before we continue, I will stop there, and let's go ahead and have some Q&A. If you could either raise your hand or you could put a question in the chat. Thanks,
I will jump
Debbie,
in,
for
Ryan,
sharing.
and share that I'm going to put 2 emails into the chat. For those of you who want to join the United Nations Association, it's an organization of everyday Americans that are helping leverage, community power on holding our federal government that is helping with international conversation through the UN accountable. There's a lot of power in us as everyday people. We have a lot of experience. Our chapter here in Westchester, which is one of the older chapters that actually Eleanor Roosevelt was part of in the 1950s, making sure that we're doing whatever we can to be able to leverage connections between people that are subject matter experts to the United Nations and making partnerships with local officials in government. I think it's important that we know that the resources are out there and we can know what we can do as everyday Americans. Doesn't matter if you're a deli clerk or you're an international policy expert, knowing that what we all can do to be able to support our international community.
I think that's very true. I see that Lisa Burton has her hand up.
Hi, thank you for this this wonderful presentation. So you were talking about how the United States is the one that is holding up these equity issues. How best would you suggest we change that dynamic?
Yeah, it is big, and I think I'm laughing because it's stressful, right? Because my response is almost always, build the noise, build the power, organize. And I know for those of us who organize, many of us on this call included, that can be exhausting. But I will say that there is a very dynamic, global diasporic climate movement that is pushing and showing up more and more. So, just last year, the Biden administration appointed a woman named Maxine Burkett, who's an academic in Hawaii, who is known to many in the field and has written a lot about climate reparations, to be his climate justice envoy. A very informed Black woman who he appointed to be that envoy. And last year, you saw, I won't say for the first time, but you had a good contingent of even the Black American and delegations actually talking, brought in by Maxine, talking to Kerry himself, about this, and the fact that, and there's a diaspora of activists who work in community, at the COPs and at home. And this year, the Movement for Black Lives and others, we are coordinated and we are having these same conversations because as we'll talk more about the Black Climate Mandate, but it's beyond Movement for Black Lives, Black Hive. All of us should see ourselves, in this diaspora when we're at the table. I mean, think about how, all of us, Paul mentioned, his background, how intertwined we all are from, between, our friends, our neighbors, the countries where we came from, economically, socially, in solidarity. So, we are at the table with the diaspora and we're putting on this pressure. And joining that call, I think is, and there are, of course, specific asks, but anyway, I won't go on, but that would be my response. Paul, do you do you
Yeah.
have a response?
So the mantra I've been trying to live by is local leadership for global goals. Encouraging people to maybe you may not be able to have the time to get in contact with members of, like, I guess you could say our federal government for the Department of State, but you may have time to be able to support your local conservation advisory committee. You may have time to be able to assist with raising awareness about some of the historical issues that have been happening here in the United States, in the state of New York, regionally, or United States of America. I know John Rhodes on this call, and I was able to partner with him to establish an environmental justice forum for the New York State Association of Conservation Commissions, where now residents all throughout the state of New York could reach out to the New York State Association of Conservation Commissions with environmental justice issues that could be then documented and then be shared with the DEC, through a lens of emotional intelligence, so they can know that these are issues that are happening. It's important that we identify what are strategic barriers that are impacting the communities, such as New York, communities in America that are transitioning. But the best way that we could do that is by leveraging the power of the people that are in those communities that are experiencing these barriers firsthand. We know that equity conversations is pretty difficult to have with municipal leaders that are dealing with an entire spectrum of issues outside of the environment. But these are these are conversations that need to occur, even if the members of government are uncomfortable holding them. Also, I strongly encourage people to reach out to Kathy Castor. She's a representative of the U.S. House of Representatives in Florida, because she is the chair of the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, an ad hoc committee that was created by Speaker Pelosi to make sure that the United States of America is aware of issues that are happening in the realms of climate change or climate emergency, so that that information can then be documented and share with the House majority leadership, so they could be best aware about where funding or what policies should be prioritized to make sure it has an immediate return on investment of a positive impact for members of our community. But I strongly do encourage, some sort of connections to local communities to leverage information that's coming from the International Committee to best educate people to reinforce the needed behavioral pattern changes. Members in government, probably just don't know what needs to be done, or may need help identifying another community that has successfully implemented some sort of renewable energy infrastructure implementation or some sort of reform, because we are home, I know in Westchester, to like a waste incineration plant that is predominantly impacting a community in Peekskill that's over 65% people of color. The sewage treatment plant in Southwest Yonkers is a community that's over 85-90% people of color through recent census data. So we do need to make sure that we do our own due diligence of holding the home fort in Westchester, or even in your own local community. I know someone here is looking for a connection for the Houston, Texas, San Antonio, Texas chapter of the United Nations Association. But it's important that we exemplify what needs to be done by leveraging the resources that we have, and also streamlining information that's honestly open to the community to be able to access.
I want to say that that's just so important what Paul said. The local action truly does matter. What we do together when we have our rallies, we boost each other up. We get these, projects going. They become models for the nation. When New York powered through a climate law, it reverberated across the country. Really, what we do truly does matter. I see that Mr. John Rhodes, you had your hand up next. I think you'll need to unmute, sir. Oh, John, you're on mute. There we go.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, something I've been thinking about lately more and more is, think about, reparations and, pollution flowing downhill and all that. And in New York State specifically, we've got a number of issues having to do with First Peoples or Native Americans, where they're it's continuing to, with greenwashing and other big projects, even further disenfranchising them. And at the same time, a lot of resistance to returning land to them, or even enabling them to have control over their land. I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts about that, because we talk about the indigenous people in other countries and the tremendous impacts they're having there. But what about the impacts on indigenous communities in our own country?
That is an incredibly important question. We speak to it a bit in the Black Climate Mandate. I also, not to put anyone on the spot, but I see Ms. Monique is with us. You with us, sis? You willing to come out and say a bit of something about this question? She's probably like having her lunch like, what? I don't know if she is, but she is a, hey, Miss Lady. Well, Monique is an activist organizer. She is Black and Indigenous. I'll let you, I guess, introduce yourself and maybe you can speak a bit. Thank you.
And thank you for having this space. I really appreciate it. I just had to come on and see what was going on over here. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, John. Our First Nations here in New York and in across the country are suffering. We are a lot of times on the front lines of the crisis in our own home country. So, and we are dealing still with land sovereignty and issues of food sovereignty and all the like. So yeah, I don't know exactly what your question was specifically, but if there was a specific question, I could try to do my best.
Within the context of COP, I mean, where indigenous impact on indigenous peoples and reparations around the world is being specifically addressed, but I'm wondering if any of the impacts on our own indigenous communities, you know, like the gigantic hydropower scheme that's being promoted by New York State now, which takes away indigenous lands in Canada, or a lot of the things that are going on upstate, where whether it's fracking or whether it's you know, the cryptocurrency plants and so on that are impacting Native communities in New York State. If any of those things are being addressed, or if it's all basically dealing with indigenous communities in South America and Asia and so on.
Yeah, I know we are working on the Hydro-Quebec stuff here in New York.
Yeah.
Specifically, I don't know how we're working on it in COP, but I'm hoping that we are. You know, I do a lot of work with the Shinnecock Nation out here on Long Island, and I'm a part of the Settlecot Nation, which is also a nation on that is not recognized federally or state, and so those are also issues with dealing with trying to have communication, proper consultation with the state. But yeah, we are working to deal with these issues here in the state, and I hope that that translates to what happens globally, and specifically in COP.
Well, thank you so much, Monique. I did not try and put you on a spot as an international climate negotiator with your
Yes. I just want to also, before I go, the +1 to the climate reparations and local action. Like
Yes.
that's everything, you know.
No, that's exactly right. And I just know that we had an Indigenous person on the line who could speak to this. And thank you so much for being willing to do so, Ms. Monique. We got more questiones in the chat. Yeah, what can we do to ensure that the burden of damage compensation, if the US ever does it, is shouldered by the fossil fuel industry and not by average citizens and taxpayers? So that is, that is a very important question. I know that myself, Monique, and others have been very involved at the state level on trying to get funding for climate action in a way that focuses on the polluters, like the polluters must pay. And I think that it's something that, that on the federal level and on the state level, we're going to have to, really just push our representatives in our advocacy to make sure that happens, that the polluters pay and that it's not regressive. Is something that some of it will be by, could be by, taxpayers, especially those of us who have more money. Let's not forget that. But we need the polluters to pay. We need the polluters to pay. Does the US committing to damage and loss put elections at risk next week with the potential conservative backlash? That's a good question. I don't know if actually, Paul, are you interested in answering, or Ms. Monique too, since if you with us?
Get out the vote.
Right? What do you, I can say that, look, that's, our politics, this is, of course, right? And that's, for backing up a little bit, that's been our issue, when we had President Trump, he was like, we're not participating in this at all. And we're rolling back everything on climate action. That really hurt us on the international stage in terms of our ability to show leadership and confidence that when the United States makes a promise and a commitment, that we'll keep it. So it is, I think I would say the answer is yes. And Emily, there's currently a lot of problems with climate finance, the global south and how it's dispersed. In case anyone is interested, thank you so much. More info on loss and damage. Hey, shout outs between Amanda and Monique. Fantastic. All right. So thanks everyone. I guess we can, does anyone else have a question? Please raise your hand. Miss Lisa, did we answer your questions to your satisfaction?
Yes, thank you.
All right. And anybody else before we move on again?
Right, I just want to plug in. We should take a moment to talk about, for those of you that are in New York in support of the Environmental Bond Act.
Yes, of course.
$4.2 billion. That's going to be able to really support invaluable investment. You can't put a price on water and air, but $4.2 billion would be invaluable towards the environmental infrastructure of our nations. There's a lot of nations that are member states of the United Nations that would love to have a ballot referendum for an environmental bond. But here in New York, it's important that we pass that to ensure that we're really supporting the needed infrastructure for land conservation efforts, flood mitigation, air quality monitoring, as well as clean water infrastructure as well too. So please go out and vote. Doesn't matter who you vote for governor or attorney general or for your Supreme Court, but please flip over that ballot and to be able to support our Environmental Bond Act.
Thank you so much. I went and voted early today. It was very uncrowded. I thank you, Paul, for mentioning that. That is certainly very important. So let's talk a little bit about the Black Climate Mandate. All right. So the Black Hive, what is it? In a perfect world, I wanted to have some video and show a whole bunch of stuff, but it is what it is. I'll just very briefly talk about this. So folks, I think very much remember the movement for Black lives, the movement in the United States, that turned into a global movement, that powered forward after what happened with George Floyd. There was a real uprising of people power, and the movement for Black lives since that time realized that climate, acting on climate was a very important plank. So what they did first is they released and created a Red, Black, and Green New Deal. That was released last year, I believe. And it really has been a work of very organic organizing, of trying to come together, say, how can we organize amongst this movement, by and for Black people in particular around climate. And so over the past year, over lots and lots and lots of meetings, all my organizer friends knows how that goes. The Red, Black, and Green New Deal sort of was kind of reformulated, and they had the launch just in August of the Black Hive. So the Black Hive is really a group of movement folks, climate leaders, community experts, other experts who come together to put together policy and advocacy for the Black Climate Mandate. So what is the Black Climate Mandate? So, and I love it because if it looks a little bit like Avatar, I think it kind of is. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 pillars. This is what there's sort of 9 pillars that are around the Black Climate Mandate. And what I wanted to do is not stop the share, but stop the, sorry, this is my, excuse me for my slight clumsiness, because I wanted to, how do I get out? Basically, I wanted to go to the actual, I wanted to show you the Black Climate Mandate. But I'm trying to figure out how do I, got it. Can folks still see my screen? No, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't.
No, we're just seeing you.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and basically, I'm going to put this also in the chat for everybody to look at. So, the Black Hive is at the heart of the movement for Black Lives, climate, environmental justice effort. We have this new Black-centered climate environmental justice initiative that has been remixed into the Black Climate Mandate. So what are we talking about here? And what I will share a link is to this page, which also allows you to like register for emails and also register to join the Hive if you're interested. But it's just a little bit more about the pillars. So the climate crisis, it's now and it's hurting us first and worse. 2, health, we have a right to breathe. Health is a human right. Free to land, and that's land back and free the land, got to do that. Water is life. Energy is essential. Labor, no human is replaceable, we're not disposable. We are here for good labor standards. Economy, the movement for Black Lives is here for climate reparations, y'all. Straight up reparations, land back reparations, and defund the police. You don't have to like it, but we said what we said. Democracy and people power, all power to the people. Diasporic solidarity. And then again, this is the Black Climate Mandate. So we're talking about global Black people. We stand in solidarity with the global Black diaspora. So that is, you know, again, this idea, you know, that when we are at the COP, we also see ourselves at the table with the global South as they are also negotiating for loss and damage, because we are all, of course, totally intertwined. So I will share this link because you can take the pledge and then you can join the Black Hive. I am also, of course, your person. And that's another reason why I wanted to have this, you know, webinar, because I want for folks to understand, again, it's important to me what my local peoples think about these things, what folks think need to be carried forward. And it's a long game, but I want all of the folks on this call to know that, you know, you can be a part of this. I'm also, you know, a part of this. And so I want to facilitate that because, you know, so we can build, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build. And so the last I'll say, that I know that was just very brief about the Black Climate Mandate, but it's exciting because for the first time, the Movement for Black Lives is sending a delegation of 12 people, and we all going to Egypt. I'm going to Egypt on Sunday. We're going to all have our T-shirts. There's, for the first time, some of our Black movement elders, some, you know, have actually, there is going to be a climate justice pavilion. You know, so we are showing up, and it's important, as you know, with Black Americans, as we show up, because again, we carry this diaspora into the room, and we're a big part of putting this pressure on the international community. So, you know, and again, the Black Hive, I don't speak for the Hive, I am a member, but I'm part of this COP delegation. And for the first time, we are showing up just to let everybody know that this global movement for justice, is still here and is showing up on the international stage for climate, for economic justice, and for human rights. And it's just the beginning. And that's why it's important for all of us to just keep building with all of our peoples, all of our communities, get this people power popping. And that's really, I guess, what I had to say. And Dale Walkinen, I see you have your hand up. Oh dear, you might be muted.
I just unmuted.
Okay.
Okay. So, you know, you're going to be in Africa and in Egypt, particularly, where the climate people are in jail. And
Yes.
I'm hoping that in some way you can recognize that while you're there, either through Facing Future or with your team, because to ignore it is really appalling. And we really have to, you know, recognize that situation, not to mention that Coca-Cola, the biggest polluter of plastic, is sponsoring the COP. Something has to be said about that as well. The third thing I want to say is that migrants are going to be coming from Africa, from the South America, from Florida, from the Southwest. migrations are going to be enormous. And we in the North kind of have to plan for that. I've been talking with city officials about this a little bit and state officials. What are we going to, we're going to need housing. We're going to need to address that in the North. Not only does the North have to, support the South financially, but to be ready for people to be moving. And I think that's being ignored completely at the COP, as far as I know, but it's something that I hope will come up. How are we going to handle migrations? And I hope we're not going to build with concrete. unless it's CO2, you can sequester CO2 in concrete.
Unless it's the good kind of concrete.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. There's so many issues, and that's one of the things that's not talked about enough is what's happening around COP, what's happening in Egypt. Yes, people are in jail right now for protest, for daring to speak up in Egypt and other places about the climate crisis. I will be frank with you. I think the first concern I know for the movement for Black Lives and for other folks who usually go and make a lot of noise at these things is not getting arrested ourselves and taking a lot of care, everything from, being careful what you have on your computer. You can't show up with leaving all your activist tees at home. We've been advised that you can't wear your LGBTQ pride rainbow t-shirts. If you have a tattoo of anything, you have to cover it. This is my favorite hoodie, but it's from it's from a pole fitness studio. I'm not going to, walk around with my pole thing on. I'm going to wear my Tommy Hilfiger plain thing. So there's nobody's taking banners. It's really delicate, and people are very concerned about that. And yes, we have to figure out, posting on social media could get you arrested. It is illegal to protest in Egypt. You can get arrested for being near a protest or being one person who is holding up a sign. So it's a lot, very, very important issue. And we do have to figure out how to delicately deal with that 100%. Hempcrete word.
Stay safe.
Yeah. We don't want to get arrested.
No, you don't.
Does anybody else have any? Oh, wait, what is that? Hands raised. Dale. Who else had a hand raised? Was there anyone else who has a hand raised?
Yeah, I was just going to share because I heard the mention of Africa, and it was brought to my attention that African delegations at the COP27 conference will be talking about reparations regards to loss and damages regarding for the fossil fuel companies perpetuated by the global North. Currently, right now, while you have members of the global North that are going to be at COP giving, I guess you could say, talking about the renewable energy transition, they are at the same time simultaneously supporting more than $400 billion fossil fuel extraction throughout the continent of Africa. So, there are going to be nations that are going to be discussing about financial investment, to be able to help remediate some of those longstanding damages, because we cannot be having conversations about, climate change and transitioning towards renewable energy infrastructure while at the same time you're perpetuating the extraction of fossil fuels in other nations. And also making sure that those countries are not being able to have a seat at the table of getting an immediate return on investment of the extraction of those fossil fuels, even though those extractions aren't good to be happening in the first place. So it's important that we kind of identify what other countries are going to be advocating for, even if it falls outside of the purview of the of what the United States of America is prioritizing in negotiations there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly. Does anyone else have a question or perhaps want to make a comment?
I just think it's really interesting that that the conference is in Egypt. It seems like the best way to suppress criticism and international discussion of your own civil rights and environmental issues is to have COP located in your country, and that way you can keep people from talking about it.
I mean, I agree, and I feel that way about when COP is in the United States too. There are degrees. I'm not coming to defense of Egypt. It's terrible. The greenwashing, what's happening, it's so repressive. It's also, I think, the first time, if I'm correct, that the COP is on the continent of Africa.
Mm.
So I certainly agree, but
Do what you can.
it's a lot. There's a lot of there's so much, we live in the world, right? There's so much hypocrisy. We already know we're going to go to Egypt and we're going to be carrying plastic water bottles like our lives depend on it, because they do. because we're not accustomed to the water. Like it's a tough thing, but no, thank you for it. It shouldn't be, it needs to be talked about by those who can talk about it as much as possible. All right. Anybody else have a question, a comment, a thought? I don't know if I'll
You be safe, Raya. You
oh,
be
thank
safe,
you
Raya
so
Slaughter.
we're gonna
Power to the
roll.
people.
I'll share the COP events we're doing. I've got some programs working with a lot of folks on this call. We've got security. We're gonna roll like together. We're gonna take care of each other. We're gonna stay out of jail, out of prison out there. And we're gonna come back, and we just want to keep building with everybody. And also, this year, I'm with Movement for Black Lives. Next year, maybe I'll move out. Somebody else, maybe one of y'all can go. Like, this is truly about like making space for each other and building, in my opinion. Let me go ahead, Monique, since I threw you into the mix, do you have any parting words you'd like to say? Because I'll let folks get back to their day. Any parting words or thoughts?
No, just be safe out there. I went to Egypt once, and it's very gun-toting because there's a lot of security issues in Egypt, but I'm sure you'll get the job done. And also, just back to what John said about not John, but someone else mentioned about doing the local stuff. Make sure we are on the ground. I think it was Paul who said the local stuff. We have to continue the local fight and build that power. So the more we do that, we'll be able to prop folks up and send them to fight the global battle.
That's 100,000% right. That's literally correct. That's what we've done in New York. Anyway, thank you so much, Monique. Mr. Paul, do you want to say some parting thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually going to reply to Emily's comment in the chat, and she's asking what are the goals for the conference of parties, and it's really about us holding true to the 2015 Paris Accord, making sure that we're doing everything within our power to limit the global temperature rise, to not exceed that 1.5 degrees Celsius, but doing it through a transparent lens of economics of what's needed for nations to be able to put together the necessary not statewide, but national frameworks for needed greenhouse gas inventories or needed decarbonization. It's important that we hold ourselves accountable through transparency of not only what carbon emissions and what greenhouse gas emissions look like right now, but also through the transparency of what needs to be done in order to offset those unnecessary greenhouse gases, decarbonize, and what the needed economics is and what the investment needs to be in that into that lens. We have emerging practices, United States of America, in terms of ESG, environmental social governance ratings for corporations to become more attractive towards investors by being able to provide economic resources by sharing a couple of their profit margins or revenue streams to help support, you could say, developments in terms of climate resilience or environmental investment. But it's important that that type of a lens of where we can identify, I guess you could say, the economic potential for the other regions and be able to invest it in the needed infrastructure for different nations. Those type of dialogues need to be facilitated, because if we do not have a framework for countries to be able to meet the needed carbon offset, or greenhouse gas emissions offset, and keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's pretty much going to spell doomsday for all of us.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. And I just want to say again, I just want folks to take heart. I know these are big international issues. It really, really, really does matter what we do on the local level, how we work together, how we build, how we set each other up. The climate crisis is urgent. We need action now. We need better commitments than Paris. We need all of those things. But this, we just got to keep building. And so thank you to everyone. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ms. Monique, who I dragged into the presentation. Thanks everybody for being on. Great showing, great to see you. And we'll just be giving more info, links, how you can follow programs. You could want to learn more about the Hive. All good. Happy Friday and have a beautiful weekend, everybody.
Thanks.